want to determine the length of a string using recursion, we already know that the length of a string is determined by s.length. The method length returns the length of a string, but here we will also see that the length of a string can also be determined by a recursive function. So previously we have seen that uh, a string is also a list. So a string is actually a list of characters. So if you want to actually determine the length of the string, so we can say that since s is a list, so s is actually a character which is a, and then another list which starts from b and ends at f. So this string is actually one character and then accompanied by, then followed by b, c, d, e, f, right? So if we want to determine the length of the whole string, so we will write len s, and then the length of s is actually the length of a plus the length of the rest of the string. So since a is one single character, we write 1 because the length of a character is 1, and then we go on to write len s dot substring 1. So s dot substring 1 is actually bcdef, because substring 1 means uh, a substring of the string s which starts from uh, the the one index. We also know that we can index strings. So the first index is 0, so s0 is actually a, s1 is actually b. So if we write s dot substring 1, this will mean that this is a substring which starts from character 1. Character 1 is b because character 0 is a, character 1 is b, character 2 is c. So s dot substring 1 actually means we start a substring from character 1, so b, c, d, e, f. So this substring actually ends at the last of the string, but it starts from 1. So if we turn this recurrence relation to a recursive function, it will look like this. So notice the second return clause, return 1 plus len a substring 1. So this is actually the first recurrence relation we wrote here. We just copied and pasted it here. But the first line, if clause, it is actually a special case because since we are taking substring of a string, so each time the string is getting smaller by one character, so at some point this string will become empty, right? So in that case, we will not make no further recursive call and we will just return 0. So if s equals empty string, so if s is an empty string and we come to this function within empty string, we'll just return 0 because the length of an empty string is always 0. So this function is supposed to give you uh, the length of a string. So let's try to simulate this function call when s equals to abcdef. So since this string is not empty because it has 6 characters, we can see that. So since this is not empty, so the first if condition will not be true. So we will go to the second return clause. So it will just return 1 plus length of the rest of the string except a. So it is actually the length of bcdef. And also since bcdef is not empty string, so in this recursive call, in this second recursive call, we will still go to that second return clause. So it will be this. So since cdef is also not an empty string, so we will just return the second return clause. So 1 plus length of def, like this. So this process will continue until we have an empty string. So now for the first time we have arrived at an empty string. So the first if condition will be true for the first time, and then we will return 0. So here is this recursive function returning 0. So now uh, actually uh, we have calculated the value 6 very immediately, but actually in recursive function this doesn't happen so immediately. So now we will see how actually the return values are passed on. So let's go to Corel Painter. Then um, let's actually simulate this for a smaller string. So let's say we are calling this function for len a b c. This is a smaller function, a smaller string, so it is pretty much easier to simulate. So since this string is not empty, so it will call 1 plus len b c. And since this string is not empty either, so it will call another function which is len c. So since this string is not empty, so it will call another function. So this. So since this is empty, it will return 0. So since it returns 0, so we have the sum of 1 plus 0, which is actually 1. So we will return this value to this function call. So since this value of len c is determined, which is 1, we will sum this up. 1 plus 1 equals to 2, and we will return this to this function call. So since this is 1, we will sum them, which is 3, and return to this function. So actually from here we get length of abc equals to 3. So if you are wondering this actually works, let's actually try to see by writing a code. Click static. Since this function is going to return the length of a string, so it is going to be an integer type, so int len, and we will always pass a string. So if the string is empty, so if the string is empty, just return 0, else return 1 plus length of s dot substring 1. So if we create a function, a string here, string s equals to a b c d e f g. So if you print the length of this string, print len of s. So let's compile this. So this has printed 7. So we are kind of convinced that this sort of function actually works.